Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 4D Method 4D user group on May 10th of 2023. This is meeting number 64. On our agenda today, gonna say a little bit more about 4D Method, the user group. We're gonna talk a little bit about a great bunch of upcoming user presentations that we have this year. The schedule is really looking exciting. Kirk Brooks is going to share with us a little bit more about the 4D happy hour, and hopefully maybe one day the happy hours around the world. We'll see. But we'll get some news from 4D from Jim Sobczak, and we'll talk a bit about the up and coming new release, major release of 4D v20, which is now out in beta. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's been some of the recent tech notes in the knowledge base. Ad will be covering some of the great work that his team has been doing. And last but not least at all, Thomas Maul is here to give a demo presentation on the new server in 4D v20, the WebSocket server. So really, really exciting to have Thomas here with us today. My name is Brent Raymond. I organize these meetings and try to provide some good content for everybody who works with 4D. I guess I'll go through my mission on the next screen, but the website is 4dmethod.com. You can contact me at 4dmethod@gmail.com. This is all about you out there who use 4D applications, who develop 4D applications, make 4D products. We just want to provide a fresh new content, a new way to see where 4D is out in the world and give exposure to your great work. And yeah, everything is on Zoom, so these days we can participate from anywhere in the world. And yeah, just show us what you're working on, your new programming techniques. And it's just very exciting to see what role 4D is playing in your neck of the woods. So and I invite you to be a presenter in this group. Again, this is your group. This is, we're here. I'm just here to introduce people, basically, for the most part. But speaking of which, on June 21st, I'll be introducing you to Tiran Berus. He'll be giving a demo on how to design a rule engine using Orda and object fields. Tiran is a Patreon organizateur level supporter of the 4D Method group, so exciting to see what he has to show us. And then on August 2nd, J. Douglas Cryer, Dougie, will be showing us the ULO, the user listing with Orda, which is one way, I guess the official name for it is the user listing. It's just a great set of components that he uses for working with his clients, and he's converted it all to use Orda for navigating the data structures and just general interface needs, and it's all extensible for the specifics of each of the clients. And then on September 20th, we'll take a look at OG Dev Tools, which is tools and code introspection for developers, from Olivier Grimbert. So it's there's a lot going on this year, and we do have an open date on November 8th. And so it does seem like the schedule is full, but I invite anybody really to just record a short demo of what they're doing if they'd like to share it on 4D Method. We have these meetings every 6 weeks or so. It doesn't mean that we can't that you can't share one way or the other. So this is the whole objective of this group, is to increase sharing and visibility of what you're working on. So just let us know. Check out the schedule at 4dmethod.com/schedule and put your name on the list. So just going to hand it over to Kirk now just to talk about the weekly meeting that he organizes called the 4D Happy Hour.
Thank you, Brent. And I'm just because folks are always asking for it. Oops, wait, that's wrong. That's wrong. I just popped in the link to here. I'll put the link for 4D Happy Hour in the chat here, but the one I just put in was wrong. Sorry about that. 4D. I have to admit, I was away for about 3 weeks on vacation, and the reports I had while I was away is that we have a lot of new people showing up at 4D Happy Hour, which is always great to see. A lot of new faces and new ideas are always a good thing. And again, I want to extend the invitation to all of you, to anyone, to stop by. Particularly, one of the things that Happy Hour is a great medium for is working through things that involve sometimes sharing screens. And I thought that occurred to me as a lot of times you'll pop in there and we may be talking about the weather or, just personal things. There's no, we invite you, I invite you to, if you pop in and that's what's going on, don't hesitate to just say, hey, do you mind if I ask a question? Or can I show you guys this? Or how do you, what do people think about whatever? It's a lot of times, I think some of the issues that are discussed in the forum take a lot longer to resolve simply because it can be hard to really understand the context that the question is being asked in. Whereas when you have the opportunity to just share it with some people and talk through it and somebody ask a question or two, a lot of times that'll clear things up a lot. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that there are a couple of themes that folks like to talk about, and we're going to be, this Friday, in fact, I think I'm going to take one of those themes and say that the theme for this Friday is going to be how exactly are you going to be implementing new technology that 4D rolls out. And personally, I'm very excited about version 20. I've played with it a little bit, and there are a lot of cool new improvements in there. And as most of you know, I've been a pretty strong proponent of moving aggressively forward with Orta in any case. Let's, if you're interested, come on in and let's have a discussion about how we go about implementing those new things, what's worked, what hasn't, what's holding you back, or what's been the benefit of throwing it in. We're at, you can find the link at 4dhappyhour.com. It's Friday afternoon, begins at 3:30 Pacific time. Typically goes for an hour and a half, 2 hours, occasionally a little longer if people are really interested in it. So thanks for the opportunity, and I hope some of you will drop by.
Thanks, Kirk. Yep, and I second the invitation and the recommendation. The happy hour is great. It's very informal. You could be a novice or a lifer, 4D lifer, and everybody would welcome you nonetheless, and work through things that you're working on together. So it's a real invaluable group. So thanks for your introduction of it, Kurt. And now over to Jim Sobczak at 4D to tell us a little bit about some of the latest news from the past couple months and what's going on with 4D.
Okay, thanks, Brent. Hello, everyone, and welcome from the 4D team. As always, our thanks to Brent for organizing these 4D meetings and for inviting 4D to participate. We really appreciate the opportunity. And as we all know, it's a lot of work to put these together, and it's not Brent's primary job. So thanks, Brent, for that.
You're welcome.
Today, we have a lot of exciting news to report, more than we normally do. So Thomas, Ad, and I are happy to be here to share it with you. I guess we'll start off with the most important announcements. On April 21st, we released version 19R8, which will be the final feature release of version 19. And then 4 days later, we released version 20 beta, as Brent mentioned. So we're so excited about this release. For those of you who have been following feature releases, you're probably already using many of the new features that are in v20, but there are many more new features added between version 19R8 and the v20 beta. So there's a plethora of new blog posts. Whenever we come out with a new beta or a new R release, it's usually like 10 to 15 new blog posts. And this is no different. The blog posts are getting more and more detail. I think they're awesome. I'm going to let Brent discuss some of the new features in version 20. He always does a great job doing that. And when I'm finished here, he'll be talking about some of the more important ones that we see. And you'll see one of them today from Thomas when he shows the new WebSocket server in his presentation. But that's just the beginning of the v20 features. And you'll be hearing much more about v20 at the 4D Summit. Yes, you heard that right. We're having a 4D Summit. So I'm pleased, excited, we're all excited to announce that registration is now open for the 4D Summit 2023, which will be held on October 3rd and 4th in the beautiful city of Atlanta, Georgia. We've had a summit in Atlanta before. We totally loved it. We've chosen a unique setting outside the city of Atlanta, about 15 minutes outside the city proper, at the Emory University Conference Center and Hotel. So there's pictures up on the website. It's a beautiful piece of property, and we're looking forward to having it there. This will be our first summit since 2018, as you all know, the one in Washington, D.C. So we're all excited about seeing our developers at this long-awaited event. We're looking forward to seeing some legs and feet instead of just the heads that we've been seeing in Zoom meetings for the past few years. So the in-person stuff, there's just no replacing that. So we're looking forward to that. The tagline for the 4D Summit: connect, learn, and transform. It's growing on me. I really like it now. Connect, of course, connect to your 4D community, learn about what's happening in new versions of 4D, and transform your 4D knowledge to 4D and your applications to 4D version 20. So we're looking forward to that. We're featuring at the summit a keynote by Thomas Maul and Stefan Schaefer, his colleague at 4D Germany. Many master classes that Brent, I think you have a slide on the master classes there. These are some of the people that will be presenting master classes. I think you know most of them. Ad, of course, Kazuke. The rest you've seen or heard about from blog posts. You've read their material. Marie-Sophie and Matthew will have a surprise masterclass on the future of 4D that I think you'll be very interested in attending. So the rest of those people we know intimately. They're all great presenters. Okay. Some of the masterclass topics include query optimization, scaling your web server. I believe that's the class that Ad will be teaching. Smart template report with 4D Write Pro and 4D View Pro, and then many more besides those that we're still working on. So you'll be hearing much more about the summit over the next several months. We just released the summit registration email yesterday. So I do urge you to plan now, register early to receive the early bird pricing. You would save $150 on the pricing if you register before July 15th. I think the first registration was from John Poteet, who was on this meeting today. And then Kirk Brooks and Tim Nevels, I think, were 2 and 3. So thank you guys for registering early. Book your hotel rooms as soon as you possibly can. So that's it for the summit. Other upcoming events next week, Will Taylor and Ad Comanche-Rensri will team up again to present the most exciting new features in version 19R8. So the feature release webinar will be held exactly a week from today. So it's on Wednesday at the same time, actually, 10 a.m. Pacific time. So please be sure to register and participate in that much viewed event. We're getting really good attendance on those now. Training, we mention this every 4D Method meeting. We're working really hard, our marketing team and professional services team, working really hard to expand our training offerings, both the on-demand training and live presentations. 2 weeks ago, we completed the final session of our 5-day training that was entitled Build Your First 4D Application with Orda in Project Mode. So that event sold out really quickly. We were really excited to see the attendance there. Many new developers, as well as long-time 4D developers who are just looking to brush up on their Orda and Project Mode skills. So we'll be doing more of those, and that will be available in on-demand training soon. And then finally, be sure to read our latest professional services marketing material about how you as 4D developers can set up mirroring and disaster recovery services for your customers using 4D. So we have several projects currently in progress now where our professional services team is helping 4D developers set up this critical operation for their customers. So those are going really well. If you're interested at all in getting more information about this, please contact your sales representative for more information. Much more to discuss. You can see it's been busy here around 4D, but I don't want to take any more time here. So thank you, Brent, for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, I said it in the previous meeting, I think when it was announced, but that 4D, the mirroring service, boy, I can't tell you how many clients have very shaky, questionable backup setups that could really use this service. And I think all of us as developers would benefit from them using that service so they can continue to use their nice 4D applications without any kind of issue happening. We do have a hand up here from Tim and a question in the chat. Tim, what was your question?
Oh, a question about Summit for Jim. It's a 2-day event, Tuesday and Wednesday. There was some emails or some talk went around that it really wasn't a 2-day event. It was a 1.5-day event, and that the first day it wouldn't start until afternoon. Is that the case?
That's correct. It starts around noon on Tuesday.
Around noon on Tuesday. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there an airport shuttle to this hotel?
I don't know if there's an airport shuttle. I know there's a mass transportation that goes from, rapid transportation goes from the airport to a stop very near the Emory Hotel. But we will be, if that information is not already on summit.4d.com, it'll be up there soon, Tim. Good question.
I may have missed it. And okay. The master classes,
yes,
are there going to be overlap? You know, like in past summits where you had to choose, I'm going to go see these different classes, but I'll miss these other ones. Could happen at the same time, or all the master classes where we can see them all.
It's one track. You can see them all.
Okay, so we can't. So we're not going to miss anything this year. Everybody's going to be seeing the same thing all the day and a half.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah,
that's nice. That's a good question. Yeah, that's I always found myself bouncing from room to room to try and get the necessary bits from each of the classes previously, but it'll be good to have full attention from everybody this time around. Yeah, that's an interesting location in Atlanta, my old stomping ground. That's where I grew up. So it'll be fun to get back home. I know that the CDC is right next door to there. Is that where the party's going to be?
No, the party will be on the Emory. They have a really nice party venue there. It'll be at the convention center.
Yeah, no, that looks like a beautiful convention center at Emory, which is in a very beautiful part of Atlanta. So it'll be fun to see everybody there.
Yeah.
Or
And
in
Mike, I did
Paris.
see your question about the topics. Just the 3 I gave you for now, and the other topics will be released soon. Mike Beatty had that in chat. So
All right, about the masterclass topics.
yes.
Now the masterclass is the general tech sessions. Will there be additional masterclass days as there has in the past, or?
You mean like a post-class, like JPR
Right.
used to teach or something? No, we're not doing that this year.
Okay.
I think we'll have plenty of content with the master classes that we have planned.
Right. Yes. Yes. I think the view from that the new CAP event center there looks pretty nice. I would say in Paris.
Yes, the
Yeah.
Paris Summit will be 2 weeks later. We've had a few customers asking about the Paris Summits. Some are planning to go, and I wouldn't blame them. It's beautiful that time of year, so that's where it'll be. That'll be a cool event as well.
What we need is a specific reason to get to Paris. That's what I need.
Yes.
So look on
For
it.
the
This is
museum.
the view you have from the conference room. So you have no way to beat that view. The view is much nicer, but the traffic is much worse. We are really in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
It's the same center we had for the 2018 conference, and we was really happy. Space, room, good working internet, not usual for Paris. Was a nice place.
I will
to answer the question about the training, we had in the past a huge amount of different sessions. We had the problems to force the sessions in 45 minutes, and we had maybe too much of them. But we had always so much to show. The thing what we needed to learn with Corona was to work without personal sessions. So we started with online trainings, we started with short trainings, we started with 1 hour on-demand trainings. And we started with presenting trainings when we have them ready. So this is a big difference to before, where we waited 2 years and to have all the trainings and all the content in one single shot. Now we publish a training when it's ready. This gives us more time to make master classes, similar as we did the last day before. So now we have just this master classes where people have a year time to prepare the content. More about quality than quantity. So it's a different format, but I think the world has changed. People now expect also different formats.
Well, and historically, we didn't always have great platforms like 4DMethod and these Zoom meetings to present our own topics. So I invite everybody who may have hoped to have shown something at the 4D summits to come and show them here at 4DMethod in these user group meetings, one way or another, whether live or even recorded. As I mentioned, our schedule is pretty full, but we were chatting earlier before the meeting started. We could have our own community summit as well, just for showing off some short demos, and doesn't have to be some of the marathon demos that we've had on here. Just 20 minutes or 10 minutes to show off something, and we could put together something for ourselves as well. One way or another, it's going to be exciting to see everybody at the 4D Summit. And thanks for letting us know about the topics and the masterclass presenters, Jim, and all of the other news. I'll just say a little bit about, as Jim mentioned, about some of the new features in the version 20 beta. It's hard to it's easy, sorry, to overlook how much is being delivered in v20, because we've had 8 R versions in v19 that have just been packed with very important features. So if you're jumping from 19 directly to 20, the long-term support versions, LTS versions, it's going to be huge, and it's already huge in itself, just jumping from R8. So these I have listed here, just some of the changes, some of them bigger, some of them smaller, but all of them important that you'll see jumping from 19 R8 to version 20. The WebSocket server, won't spend much time there because I think we're going to chat a little bit about that later. Safely comparing undefined values with others. Previously, you had to be very careful in your code not to address a non-existing property in your object, or an object that isn't defined, and because you would generate an error. So now it's handled a little bit more gracefully in the language. The declared class properties, that's an interesting one. It's actually a great addition. You can declare the properties of a class, so that I think the primary benefit, among other things, is that they're, even if they're not used in any of the code in otherwise in the class, they still are available in the autocomplete. And then you can already go ahead and type the variables as needed in advance. So that's actually pretty nice. And then you'll have a neat little catalog of everything that you can have access to, or that's used within the class. The distinct function with count of occurrences, I could have used that even very recently. So that's a very useful feature. Previously, you could get a distinct list of occurrences in a collection, but you'd have to manage the count yourself. So now we're getting that natively within the language, which I'm sure will be snappier than coding it on your own. The literal object / collection initialization, that's the ability to create an object, or to fill or initialize an object or a collection directly from a text. So you're not saying, you're not reading all of the content, you're not setting it in code, you're not saying, this dot that is equal to something else. It's quite literally the literal text, the stringified version of the object going right into the initialization of that variable, which is going to be very handy in some instances. The custom help menu, very cool for people with your applications to be able to manipulate the options in the help menu a little bit easier and more dynamically within your code. Again, just page 2 of all what's new between R8 and version 20. Being able to pass form, which we've all used with the dialog command, and now you can use it, pass it to print form and form load. So that just, using form and this sort of a variable space stored in an object called form really cuts down on the necessity of process variables and that kind of thing. You just get into a point where you hardly need variables. So at least when using forms, that is. We get a few new data store commands, functions rather. Flush and lock, locking the data store and then unlocking the data store. Important security features there. A more capable find and replace, more akin to some other programs where you can see the count of occurrences, and it's not just it's within the method editor window as a, what do you call it? Not a panel, but there's a word for it, but it's not the dialogue. It's new and better than what we have currently. But additionally, we have the PDF format for print previewing on Windows. Mac has long since had native PDFs, and printing the PDF and using preview for which is kind of like a PDF for print previewing. Now you'll be able to do the same thing more natively on the Windows platform. And again, last but not least, the new quick layer, which is in beta. Just to say a quick little bit about quick, I guess pun intended, but unintentional. It uses UDP, which is a more modern approach for the network layer, instead of let's see, what's the current one? TLC? No, it's another acronym, but it's a lot faster for dealing with packet loss. TCP, yes, thank you. Yes, I need the chat for, feel free to support me in the chat. But it handles far the packet loss. So if you've got a messy network and you're dealing with packet loss, this is said to handle that and have much faster collections when dealing with that packet loss, sort of packet recovery. And one thing I found really interesting about the quick approach is currently, if you're using the SQL port or SQL server on 4D and opening that up, you need 3 different ports open for running a 4D server. And with quick, everything will go through one port, so there won't be the that sort of support leap that we all go through for opening up all the correct ports. It's all just one port. Everything is going through that one particular socket. I think the socket being the key word here. But that is that's interesting. It's all happening through that. I see Tim's got some other comments about the difference between TCP and UDP. It's a connection-based protocol. TCP is connection-based and UDP is connectionless, right? So it's helping to get 4D to the point where it doesn't need such a full-time stable connection between the client and the server. It can act more like a web page where it connects when necessary. If that's correct, I believe it is. So just a lot coming out, just a whole ton of great new features with v20, just like all of the R features that came out in v19. So I'll stop there, but we'll be getting a more in-depth look at all of this at the summit. So excited about that. And now over to Ad to talk about a couple of the most recent tech notes that have come out. There's just a whole bunch of work that goes into these tech notes, so they're really worth a look, even if that's all you do is take a glance at them to know, to see more in depth about things that you can do with 4D. So Ad.
Thanks, Brent.
Yep.
So for this, actually last month, we were able to publish 2 tech notes, just like every month. One of the topics that was written by Nat Doe was project mode and Git workflow. I know that we have several tech notes that discuss the workflow process of using Git or other version control system. This is another one of them, and Nat is now actually working quite heavily using Git almost daily. So he has lots of experience to share with everyone. This tech note is quite useful in terms of explaining how to start from having a project database, getting into Git, and how to update, pull, push, commit, all of those things that you would need in terms of utilizing Git environment with your project application. It's quite useful. I'm reading it myself, reminding myself how to do things all the time, because usually depends on what you do. You may forget. Again, this is one of multiple Git context tech notes that you can find from the knowledge base. So hopefully it'll be something that you can take advantage of. Another one is the the use of the REST API in the context of connecting Excel to 4D application. If many of you have done it in the past in terms of making the connection between the two, you would probably be using an ODBC driver for 4D server to do that. Now, ODBC is kind of fading away. REST is now becoming a more mainstream way to communicate between applications. So this is another good tech node that will tell you how to do, how to go through the process of, configuring your REST call from Excel, how to pull data in and out, and do just the normal operation that you would usually do. Most of the time, you will see that you use Excel to generate some sort of a report. So this is definitely going to be quite useful. It's a lot lighter than ODBC, much easier to follow and to use. Many of our customers have asked, a lot of time we get the idea from talking to customers who is calling in to tech support or even through the forums. So those are some of the ideas, and then it became the inspiration to us in terms of where we get the content from. So hopefully this is going to be another one of those that can be utilized by you guys. Again, inside of 4D itself, as you know, we have 4D View Pro, which is sort of almost and not an equivalent, but as close as Excel as possible, live inside of 4D. We can always resort to that. But for another group of people who prefer to stick with Excel, they can utilize REST and the implementation describing in this tech node. So hopefully you guys like it. Again, every month we publish 2 tech nodes, and weekly we publish 4 to 5 tech tips. Any comments or feedbacks are welcome. All of the discussion usually goes to the forums, or where we publish the announcement weekly and monthly. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, the tech note on Excel was definitely very interesting. As we know, a lot of people with light tech experience out there really rely on Excel for manipulating their data. And one of the benefits of what this tech note shows is that the data can be effectively live updating. So it's not a one-shot export kind of a thing where you're generating the Excel document and that's your Excel document. You can refresh the data directly through the REST server, so it can be a sort of a living Excel document. I was hoping to see the ability to update 4D through Excel. I reckon it's possible one way or another. But maybe in a following part 2 of that tech note, we'll see something like that. But anyways, thanks again. Great stuff. Especially Git. Can all use better Git skills, especially getting into more advanced Git skills, such as resolving conflicts and all that kind of thing. But all terrific content. We have a hand up. Is that oh no, that's Tim's hand from earlier. Or do you still have a question?
Nope, it's a new hand.
Okay, new hand.
About Git. Catalog.4D catalog file. When you're in project mode and you're working with a group of people, you got to treat that thing different. Got to really be careful with it. I'd love someone from 4D to say, yeah, we're aware of that. We're working on fixing it so we don't have to handle catalog.4D catalog file in a special way with Git. It'll be just like methods and forms. Is that something that we might see in the v20, or is that something maybe in a v20 R release, or am I just being silly and there's no problem with catalog.4D catalog when you're using Git with a group of people?
Are you
So
referring to the fact that it gets updated every time when you open the application?
Yeah, everybody's got a different data file in it, and then the merge doesn't work and stuff gets moved around, and you have to basically ignore catalog.4d catalog,
Mhm.
changes.
I think it's a setup issue. So I'm strong on that here. So you can work in 4D in a way where the catalog file is a disaster and you cannot work with Git. This is possible, yeah.
Yeah.
But you
When
can also set it up in a way that it works.
When
So it's
everybody
just-
has a different data file, that's when you get in trouble. If everybody's
Yeah.
got the same copy of the data file, you don't have the issue. But that's problematic sometimes when you open different data files. So,
Please give me 2 minutes. I understood your problem.
okay,
So we have one issue which you could name an issue in the catalog. It is describing the structure, tables and fields. It is describing the visual display of a structure in the structure editor. So if one of the team members move a table, it is a change in the catalog, and it describes the index. The index is part of the structure, but it also includes a new UID to link the index, what you can name container or record in the data file, to the right index. So usually all the data files have the same UID, except if you modify by language, like set index, if you set or remove an index, then everyone gets its own. So this is for me a rare need. I fully agree that the visual display of a structure should not be part of a catalog. So there's a feature request for that in the forum, which has a high number of votes, but not a super high number. So this means it shows us that there's an interest, but it doesn't look like a priority. It is something we should take a look sometimes. In no case 20 is finished. So we will not add anything to 20. But of course, 20 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 8 is still open. And if more people have a need on that, please vote for it. Show us that it's important for you.
okay, I understand now. So
Excuse me, one last sentence. So we have had 3 different things. We have the structure information, we have the structure positioning, and we have the index. I agree that structure positioning should be outside. Index we can discuss. And the structure itself, you will always have collisions with the structure itself. It doesn't matter if you use 4D or SQL. If you modify the SQL table description, you have a collision. What I learned from best practices from other teams is that it should not be a single guy deciding when you want to add something in the structure. It should not be every developer saying I add a table, I add a field, I rename a field, I modify a field. It should be a team decision. The structure is the heart of an application. So it should be a team decision. We are adding something. And when you have a master which is doing that change, this is for the structure, for the table and the field description itself. And for everything else, you are right. There is opportunity for an improvement. If you think it needs to have a higher priority, please vote.
okay, great. Because the issue we have is with the indexing problem, because the project, everybody has a different data file, and the UUIDs for the indexing causes the catalog.4d catalog to have issues. So right now, the only way to kind of get around this would be to make all the developer on the team have the exact same data file, and then you don't have that issue. But Thomas, you don't ever have that problem, but I can name 5 developers right now that are doing project mode in teams, and we all have this problem, all of us, because we all have different data files. So I know you guys are aware of it. It's not going to get fixed in 20, but maybe in an R release, if there's enough of a feature request, we may see a change to this. That's what I wanted to hear, is where the positioning was on fixing this. So thank you, Thomas.
Okay.
Just one other question that came up in the chat.
I will answer. Give me. I mean about. I will answer the questions which was in between. I already have it in my list and have open windows for that, so I can answer them. And I can also answer for the positioning. Yeah, should I start or?
Oh, I didn't know if you
Well,
wanted to answer it right now, but if you just have it on your list to address later about I think it was the LibreOffice or something. Yeah.
LibreOffice, oh, I missed that one.
Oh, is the loading data into Excel using the REST API? Can that work in LibreOffice? I think it's more.
Okay.
I think
This
it's
is for Ed, yeah. I missed that
yeah.
one.
That's
Yeah,
more.
I'm not sure. I've never used LibreOffice, but I can only assume that if they allow REST API to be called and integrated into their application, that should work. For me, the REST API coming from 4D should be generic to any external application.
Right, right. So that's more of a feature of LibreOffice, a
Right.
LibreOffice question rather than a 4D question, but good question nonetheless. Okay, well, great conversation, but I'm gonna kick it over to the main feature here. Thomas Maul needs no introduction. However, he will have one today anyways. He's joining us again from Bavaria in Deutschland, also known as Germany. He has delivered some of the most impactful 4D method presentations so far, among them 4D server monitoring using Grafana and Prometheus. Great. Messaging with 4D v16, also great. And Listbox going in a new dimension with Orda. I have to say at the museum, we have been able to directly use all of the code from all of those demos. So I can't imagine anything less with this demo. He's also created some great on-demand training classes and summit keynotes, among them, which I've seen myself, why classes, ? Get started with 4D and Git, a great introduction to using Git with project mode. And from the previous summit, speed and scalability, covering some of the performance updates in recent versions of 4D. As the VP, Vice President of Product Strategy for 4D, he has much inside information, as we've seen here, about upcoming new features in 4D, some of which he'll continue to share with us today in his presentation entitled New Server in v20, WebSocket Server, Speed Up Your Web Clients. Thomas, willkommen zurück, and welcome back to the 4D method stage. Thank you for volunteering this demo.
Yeah, hello everybody. So can I share the screen, please?
Sure.
Okay. So before we go to the topic of the session, let's answer all the questions in between. In the forum, we have a feature request forum, and if you click on votes, you see the features sorted by votes, and the breakup is currently top 2, which is quite high. And it's funny, it was just 26, it voted up to 30, so asking for more votes shows work. And we need to, this is the biggest feature request we currently have, and it's one of the most difficult for us to do. It needs major changes in the language, and we are discussing this feature nearly weekly. This would be another feature which is very difficult to test and to be compatible in the past, because we need to convert existing applications, we need to handle migration. You might have customers in different versions. So I think this is not the writing issue, it is more the testing issue and the compatibility issue. But as said, we're just waiting for votes. One of the comments in that feature request was to change it from XML to JSON. I personally would like to keep it in XML simply because it's well tested, it is proved, it works for years, and if we don't change it, we don't risk bugs. Quite easy. When people ask me why we use sometimes JSON and sometimes XML, answer is simple. We started in the early 2000s to use XML because it was the new format. And we started some years ago to use JSON because it's the new format. But we don't modify existing files just for the fun. We modify them when we need to modify them because we want, stability is for us more important. In the past, meaning 19 and before, using XML for deeply nested stuff was no fun. But if you use the new XML path command, which is an option in 4D, you can use a deep XML path as easily as you can use JSON. You could use a path like tag slash tag slash tags, when in brackets the fifth element, next name of a tag, and 4D automatically read that. So you can go with a single line in a value as easily as you can do with JSON. So we don't win anything by just rewriting it. We just make the risk of compatibility. So this was for that. Before we go, let's start with other question. There was a question about data collection inside. I think this is the next one. Hopefully you have an all. Yeah, there was a question for data collection. If you have information, if a client is using PHP and what insight we get. So there's a blog post posted a month ago, data collection insights, and it shows you what kind of information we get since 19R6. So meaning for all the deployed versions in R6 and R7 and now R8, we get this kind of information. And we learn, by example, who is using project mode in relation to a big or small server. We get in total that already 56% of this group is using project mode, which is very positive for us. It's much more than we expected. Of course, it's the people using new versions. We learn things like how many people are using the new server, the new network layer, ServerNet, or are still using legacy layer. And we could see that especially the big ones are all using ServerNet, which was also very positive for us. We could see what kind of operating systems are used for the servers related to the sites, big servers, small servers. And we expected that large servers are using Windows a lot, but we were quite surprised how many small servers were now running on Mac. And this proved to us how important it was to go to support silicon-based Macs. We learn about if customers are using old macOS or old Windows versions, which is quite important for us to know that if we need to inform quickly that we stop an operating system like 2012 R2, or if we need to care or not to care for old operating systems. And we learn a lot about number of CPUs, sites of memory and stuff like that. We expected that people are using large memory. We was a little bit surprised that a lot of them are still using 4 GB or only 2 cores. This is of course hosted servers. So we learn about the server, but it's server only. If you are concerned about what data we collect, if you click here on the documentation, you find an detailed list of what data we collect, when we collect, where we store the information on the disk, what exactly we store, and when and how we send it to 4D. So you can see if there's anything what you don't want us to send, and there's absolutely nothing which allows us to identify yourself, except you have a really strange combination, like you have 567 clients and you have only one with that number of clients. But this is an extreme example. Normally, we cannot identify a user. What we want to do with a 20R release is to start information also about the client. And for the client, we are mainly interested in the operating system. We want to know how many users are still using old operating systems. And we want to know about the memory and how many cores you have. So this is important for us to make sure that we take care of your environment and not ignore it. This was a question for data collection. Now let's finally start. Again, Brent, thanks for the invitation. I realized that my last presentation is a while ago, and so I was thinking about what to present. And in v20, we have a lot of features. I was thinking for a while to talk about Quick. It was funny for me to see that it was also interesting for you. So I would like to talk only 2 minutes about it. Quick is the new network layer. It will replace in the future the new network layer. And it's not something we coded. This is developed by Google. And Google worked nearly 10 years on that. And Quick is not something new. Quick is used in the internet today. We are currently using Quick. 60 to 80% of the traffic in the internet is going through Quick. 60 to 80%. Almost all the traffic from Google and all the traffic from Facebook is Quick. If you ever heard about HTTP 3, this is Quick. If you're using modern Microsoft server, you might use SMB over Quick or DNS over Quick. Quick is everywhere. And we used the Quick library using it in 4D. The idea of Quick is not to rely on TCP any longer, because TCP was built in the 60s to make a trustful network, ArcNet, to have something to work even in a catastrophic event. And we all realized it's not the case. TCP is failing if we have network problems. TCP is failing if there's too low bandwidth or too much noise in the network. Quick is designed to solve that. And Google proved that it's working. So we have implemented in 4D. We are working on it for more than a year. We will need to continue to work on it. And I guess with R2 or 3, it will be fine. I hope so. And it will be in parallel to ServerNet. And we expect from it faster connections, especially in slow networks in internet. On the long run, maybe 21 or 22, I don't know, we expect features like you leave the office with wireless, you walk on the street, you get 5G, you go to the next station, you get wireless, you get home, you get connected, and the connection of the client is still working. This is where we want to go. It will take a while, but the good thing is that the base below is already developed. It was one thing I thought about, but there's so much more in v20. We have a built-in WebSocket server. This is everything with that new is the difference between R8 and 20, and more commands and more commands. And I'm just scrolling, I cannot name them, and more features and still more features. And do you see the scroll bar where I am? And still features and still features. v20 has so many features inside. We could make the keynote just by scrolling through that list. I'm talking for a while and not even reach half of the list. This is only the list of v20. So scroll it yourself. It's really worth how many we have. So finally go to WebSocket server. WebSocket server is I missed one thing about Quick, sorry. Sorry, I need to correct you. Quick is not using all the network connections through a single port. Quick is only using the 4D database connections through a single port. So what was 19.8.13 and 19.8.14, these two are now together. There's no 19.8.14 anymore. SQL still needs its own port, and SQL still needs TCP, simply because ODBC, for example, or any external access to a SQL server needs to rely on the standard network. We cannot change that. If you use port 80 or port 443, meaning HTTP, we need to support HTTP 1 and HTTP 2. So it goes through the old ports, and of course port 80 or 443, and it needs to go through TCP. We could think in the future, currently we don't have a lot of requests about a HTTP3 web server that would use Quick, but it still would use port 80 or port 443.
That makes sense. Thank you for the correction.
Yeah, so WebSocket server. This is another server. It is using HTTP, or it is using the web server. It is usually running on port 80. So it's a little bit like the web server. If you ever used WebSocket server in Node.js and JSON and C++, whatever, you can stop listening now, because it's for deep exactly as anybody else, as any other language. We just do the same. But as many developers, 4D developers, never needed one, I thought about to make a session explaining you why you need it. And I think best to do is not going through the documentation, but best to show you a simple example using a web server, a standard HTML server, how you would do coding today if you don't have a WebSocket server, and when to rewrite that to use a WebSocket server to show you directly the benefit, to show you what you gain by using the technology. I'm doing that by using a simple example, which you can find on my GitHub account. My GitHub account is github.com Thomas Maul. And if you go through the repository list, WebSocket simple example is quite on top, but I will also put it in the chat. And this is a very simple one. If you are new to GitHub, the only thing you need to go is to click on code and download zip. When you get it as a zip file on your disk, you can use it as any other thing, what you downloaded from another place. So this is the 4D code, what I just showed. That includes a form named HTML test. I run the form. And I put a lot of explanation inside so you can try later again. I start with the first button. This is opening a website, web simple example. And if I click on request update, it shows 68. And if I move it to 36, click on 36. So, very complicated site. Let's look on the source. The source has here the HTML part, the text we just saw, and here a text with ID data, nothing yet. And this is what was in and I just replaced. This is the nothing yet. And I have a button which is using on click a user action as JavaScript code named user action. So if you look on the JavaScript code, here's the user action. And there are many ways to code that in JavaScript. This is, we are not the one to talk about JavaScript. This is just one example. So I use the async command, wait for getting a 4D action call, 4D action rest, and I will show it in a minute. I've used post. I could also use the get. It makes no difference. And I'm waiting for the answer. If I get the answer, which is, I will search for the data. For the data idea is here and replace the content. That's all. So if you look on the network, every time I click, I send the rest send value to 4D, and this answers with the data. So simple. Let's look on the 4D side. Starts with a form. In the onload, I assign a random value to data, so I have something in my form object. I check if storage already contains a part from me, which I named web. If not, I create it, else I just fill it. And in storage, I store the current data and the reference of the current form window. So I can use call form to update it. We will need to update later. That's it. And form data is here. This is the value with just shown. And of course, this is outside. And of course, the slider is also form data. And the last thing we need is the method rest and value. So we don't need that now. We don't pass something. So if I just call it $1 is always empty. And I answer with using data and the current value and send that to the browser. So this is one of many ways how to build a simple REST server. I'm just sending data which I store in storage. Why do I use storage? Because I want to share it between any browser. I can connect now with 2, 3, 4 browsers and all will get the same value. All will get the value from this form. So because we need that, I will quickly go through it again. So this is the code. It was an ID data where I insert the data. It's a user action which is requesting, and I need to click on it to get the data. And if you look on the network, of course, every click will transfer with 20 bytes, 78 bytes, 78 bytes with header. Oh, no, 20 bytes. Yeah, 20 bytes. You can see here the number which is currently transferred. So this is the load of a small part. Of course, running a website where the end user needs to click every time is not what we can give to customers. So the next local step is to have a kind of timer running, which is automatically refreshing. So the second example is doing the same, just with a timer. So I have removed the button, it goes now to 36. And if I move it, it will take a while to update itself. You can see here the update. And of course, there's no magic behind. It is the same HTML code. The only difference is on load, I have set an interval of 5 seconds, 5,000 milliseconds. And so now the automatic timer is calling the same code I did before with a button every 5 seconds. And because it's running every 5 seconds, you can see that every 5 seconds it's doing the update. And the update is just making bandwidth. So this is the way how many websites are running. If you want to show current data, you have a timer in JavaScript, and this JavaScript code is requesting the data again. And if a browser is running for hours, that site will send many, many kilobytes or even larger. If it's more data than just one value, it is producing load on the server. It is using the bandwidth of your network only to get all the same data. Because the browser don't know if anything has changed. It's always, is there something new? Is there something new? Is there something new? And on the other side, it takes too long to update. It was just good luck. Now we need to wait. Okay, if you make something like a stock exchange ticker, people don't know how often things changes. But if you show things like the temperature of a machine or the turning speed of a machine, it might be important to know that the machine is breaking. The job is finished. And the last example is the same again every 5 seconds, just that waiting the 5 seconds, but I have now a text field where I can send stuff back and modifying it here. So of course, normally we can do both sides. We can send, we can send or receive. And it will take again 64. And sending is of course also simple. It is just that I have a text field. The text field is calling my update, and my update is pushing the stuff to the server. That's all. There's really no magic. With the standard HTML stuff as we do since 20 years. This is standard. Of course, what we added with 19 and 19R releases, with new ways to make preemptive web servers, with a new way to have things like with even a single client, a single browser can run several parallel sessions on the server. We have a scalable web server. Everything makes web server faster, but we still have a problem that the client needs to pull data. And a WebSocket server is about that the server can push data to the browser. So every time when you normally do a browser, the browser is requesting data from the server. It is using TCP. It asks for something, it closes the connection. It asks for something, it closes the connection. It is get and receive the data, finished. And WebSocket means we are talking in both ways. We do a two-way communication, makes everything a little bit more complicated. What I forgot, here's the part when we send data. Meaning when I'm pushing data, my update just send the data back and I put it in storage again. But this is also standard code. So now let's go to the WebSocket test. I have again a form like that, but I also have a method. So before I go through all the method and show it to you, let's try it and see what happens. I have my form, I have my browser, and the data was immediately here, 42. But let's now move it around. Do you see it? I don't think that Zoom is fast enough. So I can make 100 of updates per second. It's not every 5 seconds. Let's look on the source, and especially not print source. Let's especially look on the network, which is amazing stuff. This is the index page, and this is WebSocket, another entry here. And now I'm moving. Do you see how fast it scrolls? Instant. You can make 100 updates per second. And if you look on the bytes, if I move, then just one, it goes up 2 bytes. So it's very cheap. So let's see how it works. So this is the HTML part, which is more or less exactly the same what we just saw. I have again the data ID to find that, and on change of a text field, I call my update as before. But this code here is much longer than before. Sorry, the JavaScript code is longer. So it's a little bit more work needed. And I don't think that I scale up with them. I can scale. But for seeing the code. So it's a protocol HTTP or HTTPS. This normally says what site you want to access. So I'm checking here the current protocol used. So to make it generic, my 4D website could run with HTTP or could run with HTTPS. So in JavaScript, I'm checking if I'm encrypted or not encrypted. And if I'm not encrypted, I'm using WS as the new protocol. And if I'm encrypted, I'm using WSS. So this is a standard name, like HTTP or HTTPS. So I'm telling the browser that I want to have a encrypted or non-encrypted WebSocket server connection. So you need to know that every modern browser is supporting WebSocket. You don't need a special browser for that. When I add the 2 colons and add the current host. So okay, for me, current host is just localhost, but it could run on any kind of IP. So with this code fragment here, I'm having a flexible way to automatically use the same host, which is the same server, which is hosting the website. And this is important to know. You can run in 4D a web server, which is at the same time also a WebSocket server. Or you could run 2 computers. Let's say your website, your static website, is hosted on an Apache server somewhere, and 4D is only providing the data. So the browser would connect to my server, and the JavaScript code internally would connect to mydata.com. This is possible. It is not mandatory to have both on the same site, but most people will do. In most cases, you will run web server and WebSocket server on the same computer, even on the same port. In my case, I'm using port 80 for both, but it's not mandatory. But by using this code, I have a generic way to use the same server. So when I tell JavaScript that I want to have a new WebSocket connection with a new WebSocket, this gives me an object named socket. And now I need to add to this some functions. I need to respond. I can respond to onOpen. OnOpen is called, executed when the connection to the server is done. I don't do anything here. The same is for onClose. I can respond to onClose. The important thing is onMessage. OnMessage means there is information sent to JavaScript. JavaScript wants to or should respond to the message. I get again my data element. I create a new element inside and I replace it with the event data. Event data is the data I just received, or event is what I received. And you might remember and inside the data is the data part. And the data part was just the number 30 through 40, 42, and so on. So this replaces the timer. And it's called every time when I get new data. Here in this case, I only send a number, but you could also send an object with many different values. I will show it later in a more complex application. Here it is just one number, so I can directly use it. I have an on error part, which is called when we get errors. And my update is before, but this time I use socket.send. So I'm using the socket, what I got from WebSocket, to send data through it. So this means that while here we was receiving only data, always data, I can also send data. Scroll down, sorry. This window's not open. So you can, so I've sent data to the server, and the server responded with the same value. Why is the server responding? Because there could be several browsers connected, but I'll show you that in a second. So the more complex thing is, on the browser side, you need to respond to on open, on message, on close, and you need to have code to send. But with standard JavaScript code, it doesn't matter if it's a 4D-based WebSocket server or C++ or Node.js. It's always the same JavaScript code on in the browser. So now let's take a look on the 4D part. In on load, as before, I first give a random number. I'm calling a worker to start the WebSocket server. And I pass command init, which tells myself this is the first call, the current form window and the current data as parameter. I define a global variable. So why do I use global variables? Normally in modern code, you don't need global variables anymore. You use a local variable, that's it. Anything which cannot be stored in a local variable is usually in form, in a form object. The problem with a form object here, it would work great. You could host or keep the WebSocket server inside the form. But this means that the WebSocket server could only run if a form is displayed. If you run the server on a Microsoft service, or if you run it on a headless computer, you don't want to have a form. So we need a way to store this variable. If you use a local variable, it would automatically be cleared when the method ends. And if an object is cleared, the object is not existing any longer. So by using a worker, and the worker with a global variable, this means that the variable is existing as long as the worker is existing. And as long as I don't kill the worker, it's existing till I quit 4D. So this is something some people did not understood yet. If in 4D you create a new class instance, this class instance is existing as long as the variable is existing. If the last reference of a variable is removed, the object or the instance is removed. I'll come back to it in a minute. So we are in init. I check if this variable is empty or if something inside. If it's inside, the form was called twice, so the object is already existing. The complicated thing in 4D is you need 3 classes to handle a WebSocket server. This looks on the first view really complicated. And this is where we need to talk about several times, because this is the magic behind what you need to understand. Here I create the WebSocket server is provided from 4D. So it's in the 4D namespace. I want to have a WebSocket server. But I need to pass as a parameter a handler. So the handler is a way to tell to the WebSocket server what to do. I create this handler here with my own CS, so it's my customer space, or my own developer space. I create my own handler. And I named that one WSS handler. But I could name it as anything I want. WSS is a common name based on WebSocket server. If you look inside, we see the same concept as on the JavaScript side. It's the same concept. We need on open, on close, on error. So 4D calls with functions when the WebSocket server is started on open, when it's closed or quit on terminate, and if anything goes wrong on error. So this is a way for us to pass several different parameters, functions, behavior to the WebSocket server. When we need on connection is called every time a browser connects to our server. So of course, we don't do all that work for a single browser. We want to have several browsers able to connect. But each browser might either get the same data, or you want to identify each browser. You want to know one browser is from Brand and one is from Jim, and you want to send different data. Or let's say one browser is from sales department and one browser is tech support, and you want to show different data. So you can do it if you want. And we need to give more information to this handler in a second. And I can even have my own additional functions. So set form is my own, where I store the form reference, the window reference, and I store the data. And this is the same field which I passed in the constructor, the new constructor. So coming to on connection, because this is challenging when the first time when you see it. So every time when a browser connects, I need to give to 4D another class instance. Now a connection handler class instance. The interesting thing with giving its own instance is that this own instance can have its own data. This is one of the important things of using classes. A class is not just a collection of functions. A class also has its own data. And by having its own data, it can use it later to identify the browser. And we see that in some minutes, where I send information to the browser based on the action of the browser. And with connection handler, it's the same story again. It has an open function, which is used when a browser connects. So when the browser connects, we're on connections, but this is now per browser. And the first thing I do when a browser connects, I send back our current data, 5, 10, 15. Let's open a second browser. So let's go to localhost. Something in the cache. Stupid. Sorry, it was in the cache of a browser. It's a different site before with localhost. So then the wrong one. This is strange. I'm sorry. It was the same example with two different ones. So I need to have the right idea, of course. And it directly showed 70. So it directly started with the right number. And where does the 70 come from? Why is the information sent directly? Information was sent directly because on connection, many windows. The first thing I do when a browser connects, I send the current value. This is the very first thing. And this is why the 70 immediately arrived. When we have a close, we have an error, and we have a new message. The new message comes when on the browser side, I'm entering something. Because I entered something browser side, I receive now the data. And in Para, we have a message with our new value. And then I can send the data back. So I could now use directly the send command. Or why should I send the data back? So what am I doing in call worker? Wrong button. What I can step in. Oh, strange. Okay, no problem. I can. Here's the step in. Too many windows. So this is the number I want to store in my handler. So the good thing is that I can store inside. And now I'm looping through every open connection and send the new data to all the connected browsers. Because it could be one browser, it could be 5 browsers, it could be 500 browsers. And VS connection, VS is my handler. And inside I have a connection per connected browser. And for each of them, go through the loop. So let's do it again by code. Because this is really confusing when you use it for the first time. This is the strange concept of having so many instances. I know I needed myself a while to understand it. But if you go through it several times, it suddenly gets clear. The WebSocket server is provided by 4D and is doing all the internal work. To make it usable, you need to have a handler knowing what you want to do with connections. And you need to define your own handler. This is that one. The handler needs to respond to the start of the socket server, to the close, to errors, and to new connections. And for new connections, you're giving him another instance. So usually this handler is existing only once. You have one WebSocket server, so you have one handler. The connection handler is existing once per connected browser. If you have 10 browsers connected, this is existing 10 times. And the connection handler also has open, terminate, and error, and it responds on messages to call back. So now you see this kind of long paths. So when 4D receives a message, it calls me and gives as a parameter the current socket connection. This is my own object. And if I go inside here, WSS is the WebSocket server parent of the connection, because this connection belongs to this socket server. Here I can go one step down. This is the handler, the object I gave before. And inside the handler, let's move the handler to the side. And inside the handler, I have created my own this form and this data object. So this looks complicated, but 4D helps you with a new mouse over event, showing you the documentation of the internal classes, and the documentation for it. Complicated, isn't it?
Come on, Thomas, can you run this example again and drop in the debugger and show in the debugger $WS? I'd like to see what that object looks like when you open it up on line 12.
Make it directly when I open when a browser connects or when the server starts. Well, let's do it when a browser. Let's do it when a browser connects. Why not?
Yeah, but I want to see in the on message function what $WS object looks like.
Okay. This is a message. The on message is if I send something 85. So we have a connection, the handler itself, we have an idea, we have connected, and this is when I have here the data which is received inside, and my handler with my own two data, and the data type. And I have currently one open connection, and the open connection is the same stuff again. I was browsing myself in that stuff and was completely confused because it's a kind of recursive browsing. You go through a loop and you're really confused. So for me, the important trick is you need one WebSocket server. You need to tell to the WebSocket server what to do with connections. This is with the handler. The handler knows how to work on that. And the handler needs to have one connection handler for each connection. And each of these objects have their own variable space because they have their own instance, so you can have your own variables added here. And this is the reason why we gave you with class to connect or with class to define, because this allows you to define your own additional objects. So before going back to that one, I will show you now a big application to show you a real benefit. So the benefits, what we saw so far, was that we could send a huge amount of data. Where's my form? Very quickly. I need to make that form smaller. So I can send very, very quickly with data with a very small impact on bandwidth, and I can communicate both ways. But it was only 1 byte or 2 bytes what I was sending, so it was not really so much fun. So I found an interesting example in the internet, which I used myself from different devices. Let's first go to the documentation, where I don't forget that. It's also on GitHub. You can see I started writing it 8 months ago, so I needed a while to understand how WebSocket server really works. 5 months ago, everything was working for me fine, but we were still needing 5 more months for testing before we shipped the feature. So this really feature which was needing a lot of time for testing. And this feature is a fork from this Git project. And this project was, I do have my code. It was developed for microprocessors. So I don't know if you know what little tiny microprocessors, ESP8266 or ESP32. This is microcomputers, what we use for Internet of Things devices. This is about a $4 chip, which with the PCB around, the chip is just $1. It has only 80 megahertz only. It has only 80 kilobyte of RAM. So this is something for the hardcore people. Or you use a ESP32, which is a little bit more expensive with $6, but it has 2 cores with 240 megahertz each. It has 280 megabyte of RAM, sorry, kilobyte of RAM. Who need 280 kilobyte? It's way too much. 4 megabyte of flash RAM to store stuff for €5 or $5. And this device often needs an interface to communicate with them. And that guy wrote this interface and pushed it as open source in C++. And I wanted to see how complicated it is these days to convert a C++ application to a 4D, C++ library to a 4D-based library. Because 4D we have a lot of updates to the language the last time, so I tried it. And here you get my source code. And I come back to this page in a minute. Let's first open that. I renamed it to WebSocket UI, and I created some this code. So my first one is again calling the worker to keep the process running, and it's giving the parameter symbol. Scroll it up, make it a little bit smaller. Symbol. Okay, in the symbol one, I create a new class from myself named UI and store it again in a process variable. I tell the class to create a new button named push button and to call this formula if something happens with the button, and to create a new number named a number with the value 50 and give a fun. And tell the GUI to begin with very simple UI. So let's try, execute it. I open a browser. And this is my page. I have a push button and I have a number. So now think about it. we allow you to create a web server with a graphical user interface with just 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of code. So if you want to do it, all you need to do is to copy these 4 classes in your application and run it as shown here by telling the button what kind of fields you want to have. If I click on the button, 4D opens an alert. Why? Click and release click. Because my simple callback is really simple. It just alerts with the number of the control, the type of the control, and the value of the control. And it could be a click or a press the mouse button, release the mouse button. Or if I'm inside a number, 51, 52, and so on. So that was the simple one to show how it works. The simple one, what I missed to say, 1 to 100, this means it controls the 2 buttons up and down. You don't allow to go below 1 and above 100. But let's make it more complicated. Before I do more complicated, I quit and restart 4D because the library was not designed to be modified while running. And I did not rewrote it, I just kept the library as it is. Normally you launch your interface in a given way and when you keep it like that. So the next one is init. This is a little bit more complicated. But it shows you the power of the stuff. So I start again with my new interface. I give a general option to say if I have a slider, it should be continuous. You will see it in a minute. I have now 2 buttons. One is named push, one is named another. To the second one, I give a color. I want to have a switcher with a callback. I want to have a number again. I want to have a text. Text returns me its ID. With add control, I can use the same ID to say max, which is the number of characters. I cannot enter more than 32 characters. So you have also low-level impact. I want a separator. I want a pad. Before we go through, I show it to you. So let's execute demo symbol. And my browser. I did. No, I already did it. I have now today bad luck with my browser cache. Click twice. Twice is not a good idea. And demos, not simple. Maybe that was my mistake. I clicked the wrong one. Yeah, sorry, I executed the wrong method. So this is a more complex one, and I go through in a minute. I have the 2 buttons. I have a switch. I have a number. I have a text. I have a button, a pad, a label, a picture, a slider, date, time, password controls, and a selector. The complete user interface, by the way, is responsive. So you can also use it on a phone or tablet. I can do by code stuff like if I disable that switch, remove a second button. If I enable again, show it. So you have impact on what you do. I can do stuff like with the state example here, the display is browser dependent. So I'm now using Safari. If I would use Chrome, something with cache today. The different kind of display. You see Chrome is using a different display as a browser, but it's automatically the native interface of a browser. And you see that both browsers are communicating with each other. So I'm changing something here. Of course, it's no fun to have the same browser on the same two browsers on the same computer. But imagine you have a control of a device, and you want to control the speed of a device, or you want to see the current temperature, or you want to stop a printing job, or you want to see how many printing jobs are still running. One guy could run through the smartphone, the other use a tablet, the other use a computer, and everybody immediately see the changes in the same interface. This is the fun of WebSocket server. So the code in 4D. I tell it to use a button, a switch, a number, a text. Some elements like picture label, I just give a source of the image, I give a text. For date example, I give a date, a time, a color. And for selector, I need to add several options. So this is the title, and this is the three available options. My callback is a little bit more complicated, but still too stupid, just to show it. If it is the third use control, I want to hide the second control. If it's the control 4, which is the number, so this was 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not using the variables. It's just the first graded, the second graded, the third graded. It's kind of hard-coded identifying. This is possible, but it's the wrong way. I'm just showing it because it's more easy. So by simply using the direct control number, I can respond to it. If it's a number, I check if the entered number is between 1 and 100. If not, I'm modifying it. And I call update number, which is, what is that doing? With 0 means send it back to everybody in the network. And the minus client ID means send it to everybody except the browser which was sending the message. So when I modify that number here, show it here. Yeah, if I modify it, this is not my day with cache. It is supposed also to modify it here. And if I do something wrong, it is supposed to update only my wrong number because I ended something which is not valid. Something is with my cache today. I'm sorry for that. And yeah, this was the callback. And in most cases, I just update. Update means send it to everybody. So minus means I don't need to send it to the browser which made the modification because it already have the data. I only need to send it to the others. And what is interesting in this kind of work, and this was one of the reasons why I used it, this is the HTML source, all of it. Because the HTML page is completely empty, there's nothing inside. And all the data you are seeing is transferred through WebSocket. Button up, button down. Make a reload. Did you close it? Reload is not supposed to close. Oh. I guess as developer, you know the story. I tried this example many times, and every time it was working.
It's the curse of the live demo.
Yeah, this is the price. And now I cannot even open the developer tools because my screen is too small. Let's see if Chrome is still working. Network. I do perform a request. Here's the full data sent, finally.
Can you say a little something about how easy it was to port the project to 4D? I've done the same recently, and it's pretty nice. I mean, it's all architected very similarly these days with the classes, and it's just syntax really.
Honestly, it was I think a day stupid copy paste code. Stupid because I need to replace equal with colon equal, and I need to replace equal with a single equal.
Right.
But I could not do it by code because there was that little differences with WebSocket server for with cheap micro devices is not as powerful, so it's not able to talk to several browsers at the same time. It don't know about that many browsers are connected, while 4D can do that. So I could reduce code. I needed to find the stuff I don't need to do because 4D is automatically handling it.
Mm.
And the challenge was for me, I did it at a time when the WebSocket server was not fully working. So I never knew if it was not working because I did not understood how it works. There was no example existing, because it was a bug or because I did something wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the data sent. And you can see more or less that the data is what we just typed in. And when the JavaScript code is building that user interface on the fly, all the user interface is built on the fly with JavaScript. And that is part of that library, which I didn't touch at all. I just use it as it is. So the story is you can do really complicated interfaces. And as a last example for that interface, before we go back to code, launch it again for quit. I think I clicked on before I fully quit it. The third and most complex design, which is named, now I close all of them to avoid that I click on the wrong one, tab. So the tab one also opens a window in 4D. I quit now Safari, hoping that it will avoid some of my caching problems and restart it.
I find it very interesting how much it makes sense that you're using a worker for this kind of application. Just seems to be perfect, hand in hand with the way that the socket interface works.
It was a breakthrough. In the beginning, I tried to avoid a worker and avoid a project variable, and nothing worked at all. Till I realized that the WebSocket server was running for a fragment of a second and then automatically deleted, and nothing could respond. And the worker solves all that issue. Similar for if you use system workers, which is a great way to communicate to other tools, console command line interface tools. The worker solves the problem about how long is that other class available. So when I'm talking to another application, my process is finished after a fraction of a second. The other process, the external worker needs 5 seconds, and I get never the communication back because I'm not existing any longer. And the worker stays here. So back to localhost. So this is now my tab interface. I have several tabs. This is cache data, so let's clear it. I have a graph which is updating itself every 5 seconds, I believe. I have the buttons as before, as I showed you before. I have a slider, and the slider is also communicating with 4D. And this is the continuous deployment, which I really like. When I move the slider in 4D, you have at the same second the slider in the web browser moving. And of course, the same if you have 10 computers with 10 browsers, all of them are moving in parallel. Quite nice. The pad, with 2 other stuff, with 4 fields. So you can group them together. You can even group sliders together to have several sliders in the same button or the same thing. And of course, all is responsive. So to do that in 4D, here I'm used the same trick. I put everything in the form. And when I start the worker, I tell him the current form window, so the worker can call me back. And when he needs to call me back, Init with tabs. This is that one. Where do we show it? First. Yeah, I need to explain something more. Sorry. The tab is the most complicated object here in this library. So we have a kind of high-level commands like button. And this is an easy command because you just give the title and a callback. You might add some more parameters, but usually it is just two or three parameters. But button internally is only calling add control. Add control is the low-level command. And with add control, you have much more features. The most important additional feature, and this is now the problem on that large font. I can give a parent object. The parent object means this control belongs to this parent. So I want to have all these buttons as part of the first tab, and the other object as part of the second tab. And sometimes, like here, I want to have a new control from type number as part of tab 1. And I also use that to give minimum and maximum numbers. So this is a kind of inheritance system. The complete controls is about inheritance. And I can pass a user object. So this is my own object where I can put in whatever I want. When anything happens with this control, I get this object back. So here I have my own attribute, what I name job, and say the job is clear graph, the job is height. And I'm even telling them what object to hide. The job is number, and I give also a name to that field. That name is stupid, I could use any kind of name. And if we call it in the more generic callback function, I'm getting the user data as part of a parameter list. Okay, if I need to hide something, I know what user data control tell me what to hide. If a job is a number, I know where I need to check for minimum, maximum. So it allows me to be more generic.
I assume that you can position, I don't see any positioning information about place this object here or there.
A little bit. I talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
So there are a huge amount of parameters and too many parameters to talk all of them. So the easy thing is we go back to the website, to the GitHub repository. Here's an example what you just saw. That we have a set of 4 classes you need to embed. What you need to install it, to get it started, what kind of objects are available. And here it explains you for each of the stuff how to do it. This is the code you just saw. When it goes through the different kind of callback methods, what kind of buttons we have, what kind of switches, button pad, what kind of events you might get, how the labels could be displayed, how you could position it, if it, like, for example, using that to have 2 lines. As you see, we can use different colors. There's a set of colors predefined. This was with special text fields depending on the browser. Select option, separators. And more documentation, how you can make a log. A log is interesting in the beginning if you don't know what's really going on. So you want to have a text file with all the events in a log file so you can see what happens. The supported colors. And the fun thing is inline styles. So with inline style, you can use CSS. And then it's up to you what you do. If you know CSS, you can use CSS, and then you have control about the display. If you don't know CSS, you cannot do it. CSS is now overriding the way how it is displayed. Yeah, and last thing was the group controls. and white controls and with graph feature. So, and if you go back to the original library and go through the documentation here, you see that it's nearly the same, just the installation is of course different. And when you go in the code part, the code looks a little bit different because this is now C++ code. But as soon as we go to a single object, we have the same kind of events. And I tried even to mimic the parameters. So the same command, just with not with ESP UI, but with UI.label would work in 4D. We have exactly the same. So you can use a lot of examples from this documentation, or you can use the other questions from that side and can use it directly in 4D. And for me, it was also a proof case how closely I could convert the library. And this was a question from Brent. So to see the code, we go classes. And if we let's hope that I find it, because I was not expecting this question. Let's call back delete control. I don't need marshal control at all. I could skip that. This was one of the things I didn't need to write. On event, the on WebSocket event is in my case in my own class. They mixed it together. So I have the on WebSocket event here, which made it a little bit complicated. Here I don't need it to have that full list because I don't need in 4D to make it so complicated with if. It was easier to write for me. So it was sometimes not simple coding, it was thinking. But many parts was really just overriding. This is the JavaScript code. Hopefully I find something which I can completely. Of course, sorry, I was not expecting the question, so
Yeah,
now
no.
I've struggled to find an example. But many stuff is really just copy pasted and rewriting. The
Right.
challenging thing was to find what is easier with 4D to do it in a other way.
Yeah, in my experience, it's just always been the scope of the variables. That's, see what should be in this and what should be, in stored with a specific instance or whatever. Different class.
But one example, what I wanted to say is, if you code the library correctly, you don't need to know anything about WebSocket server. You're just using the result.
So I guess that's a big question. You mentioned that you were using these small Internet of Things processors or devices for certain uses. I'm curious, what do you have being controlled by this library?
I've controlled nothing based on 3D. This is all controlled directly in the microprocessors. So the idea is, if you have something like a temperature sensor or garage door sensor, or if you a sensor to measure the, what's the English wording? If you want to know if you need to water your garden to get the moisture, you need sometimes an interface to control these devices. You don't always want to remove it from the wall to connect it through a serial port just to modify it or put a new firmware on it. So a kind of device like that. And this is an interface you, as a IoT developer, always need to do. And when I had a more complicated one, I was looking for a library, and I found that one. And as we just had WebSocket server in development in the company, I thought, wow, this is great. This is the example I wanted to, I was looking for, to show something a 4D developer could use, even if you don't care how WebSocket works, just because you want to have your own interface.
Right. No, it's very neat how dynamic the interface is. It can just be added with lines of code here and there.
Yeah.
Using the component.
And when you start looking more in the source code of websites, you find that more and more. So a good example is stock exchange tickers. When the ticker is really responsive and the ticker is current, it's usually a WebSocket server behind. If it makes an update every 5 or 10 seconds, it's the old on-timer event. Everything which goes dynamically is usually using WebSocket. And another reason is when you have a website running on a given host and you need data from a second server. Normally, a browser cannot talk to 2 servers at the same time. WebSocket is the solution for that. WebSocket even allows you can have more than one instance. So you can talk to 5 servers at the same time. It makes really cool websites.
So there's a couple of questions in the chat before they get too long. I don't want to interrupt anything that you wanted to jump to next, but there's the all-important question of what's the cost of the WebSocket license?
Yeah, it's a web server license. You need a web server license, meaning unlimited web connections. If you have an unlimited web server license, you have also a WebSocket license. And it's designed to be running on the server, not on the remote. So this also to answer the question before it arrives. In the year 2003, we added a way to run a web server on the client, which made absolutely sense 20 years ago, because this was a way to scale a server, to have 2, 3, 4, 5 computers. These days, you use one computer with 2, 5, 16, 64 cores. It's much cheaper and faster. So scaling goes by number of cores, not by number of clients. You don't have that latency delay going to another server. And it was a way to have the web server outside in the hot internet and the database protected in the local network. It was a kind of data protection. If you need that, today you simply run Nginx or Apache proxy or something else outside to redirect that stuff. There's no need to move the client outside. So I don't see really a future for that.
So are you saying that you're going to drop support for running the web server on 4D client?
Did not say that, but we did not enhance it for many years now. So all the new cool features are for server only.
Okay.
And this would work with the more modern way of launching your 4D server, the web server class.
The idea was mainly to allow 4D to have more than one server running at the same time.
Right.
Honestly, we needed it for the data explorer to have a second server or to have an admin server. And this was the requirement why we wanted to have a second server. And again, this was developed to run on the server host itself and not on a client.
Right. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So one of the features about the running the server on the client, I know people who've done this, they were required that their web server could not be on the same machine as their data. And so
use a proxy, use a reverse proxy.
Okay. All right, thanks.
This is usually the best because the admin has full control about it. Most admins knows how to do that. And if a company has a request like that and we don't know Nginx or Apache traffic server or commercial products, we don't know what we are doing. And the really big companies usually have a box named application firewall or another fancy name, which is quite expensive and is analyzing the traffic and only forwarding traffic, which is whitelisted.
Yeah, there's not a great argument for the client web server anymore. We had that at the museum and we've since migrated it back to the 4D server and haven't looked back. Yeah. There's another question. Will implementation of SSE be considered to allow unidirectional communications from server to browser? SSE from Keith White at 154.
Cottage and Sofan Energy, no.
I'll be right back.
Events can use. Is it still relevant? Is this not the stuff you needed before you had WebSocket server? I think this is before WebSocket server. So currently we have no requirements for it, and I'm not sure it makes sense. This is, I think, long ago.
Okay. Another question from John Groh. Does CORS, C-O-R-S, enter into this at all?
Nope. Courses usually, no course is needed if you do. I said something wrong before. I said that a browser cannot talk to two servers at the same time. It can do it using HTTP requests through, and if you do that, you need CORS. So it was wrong that you need WebSocket to do it. You can also do it with modern browser if the server support CORS, and 4D is supporting CORS. CORS is nothing else as a kind of whitelisting to say that even if you don't provide it with pages, you still answer questions. I needed that myself some years ago when we did in Germany classes how to use I even forgot her name. Ionic. Ionic is a JavaScript framework similar to Angular or React, and it's more front-end based and not middleware based, while Angular is more middleware. So Ionic both the front-end, Angular the middleware, and 4D the backend. And we used it to show customers how to build modern, dynamic, responsive applications using on a smartphone or on a tablet. And Ionic had at that time a cool interface builder, which was a kind of cloud-based page where you could create web pages by drag and dropping. This was really cool because everybody could use it. You don't need to learn HTML for that. But you use it in the designer. The designer for prototyping was hosting the site, and the data came from 4D. So the REST access arrived in 4D. I used 4D Action to do so. It was before we had the REST server. And all that was rejected because there was that thing named CORS, which I never heard before. So I Googled CORS and realized it's not so difficult to do. The only stuff I needed to do was to set some HTTP headers and to support what we name pre-flight, the first checking if we're allowed to use it. It was 10, 15 lines of code, I think. And some years later, we got more and more requests to it. And yeah, this is why we implemented CORS. It's easier to say, yes, there's a checkbox compared to, yes, you have to write that code. But for a WebSocket server, you don't need CORS.
Okay. There was one other question, but it's not specific to WebSockets. Does anyone else have any specific question about the WebSockets and the demo code or the shared classes, which are totally cool, in my opinion? Yeah, the other question was about this looks very exciting, but also they were wondering about the 2020 demo from Laurent Ribardier about the web forms, the new ability to of creating web apps using 4D. Is there something you can speak to as far as that goes?
Yes, give me a second just to be sure that I get the story.
In the last summit, it was one of the
yeah. Immediately.
Oh, there you go. There's a difference between WebSockets and SSEs. Monodirectional and bidirectional.
So for me, I personally, when I learned about WebSockets, I was fascinated because it handles all the traffic. I have one single socket open and I can receive and push data. So all the communication goes through a single channel. And the data was extremely small and fast. Okay, this is I like that text here. Where was the text I just saw? This is what I also saw in the summary above. WebSocket is a little bit more complicated. As I just told you, you need that 4 free classes, you need that 4 events to handle, but you do that once. And as soon it is done once, everything is gone and very easy. And the job behind, you don't need to do because it's provided by 4D and browser side is supported. So I currently think that WebSocket server should be better. Let's look for disadvantages. Packet expansion. Yeah, you need to do it with extra code. This extra code works quite well. So here we have that connection which is still open. I click back to 4D and quit. Connection is closed. Start 4D again. And now I need to find my browser and the connection is back. So the fun thing, you have a smartphone, a device somewhere, the server is off, you see on the phone that the connection is broken, the computer is back on and the browser automatically reconnects and gets the new numbers. This is a cool feature for me, it's not a disadvantage. You need to write some code for it in JavaScript, but if you do it right, you get a wonderful solution.
That is nice.
So if this is the disadvantage, I don't care. So yeah, the last question about the presentation 2020. Yeah, we will have another presentation which makes it worth to visit the summit 2023. It's 3 years later and we spent a lot of time working on that, and not sure it is the main event of the summit, but it will of course be one of the most important ones. Big question about the last summit. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of this and the feature developments through the R versions have been working on the fundamental support of that what you were showing off in that demo. What Laurent was showing, the web application features.
So to avoid misunderstanding, we don't think there is one web solution. We believe that the market is big and the needs are big. So we started with a web server in 4D in version 6.0. This is now 25 years ago. But web server was rewritten several times. We rewrote it to make it faster, to make it more reliable, to make it more scalable. A lot of rewrites we did in the last year was to make it scalable, to run, to have one browser, to allow one browser to use 5 cores at once, if you need that. We added the session by object. Not know if you know that session is an object 4D automatically creates if on web connection comes in and if you use the new scalable web server. And this session object, similar to storage, is a cross-process object, but it is with one session object per browser connection. So if this browser is using 5 tabs or 5 different processes, 5 different connections at the same time, they share the same session object. And in this session object, you can store whatever you want. You have a kind of session variables. This session object is shared with all connections coming in through 44 mobile. And this session object will be shared, of course, for the new project Laurent showed 3 years ago. So you can exchange data in between. A lot of that work we did in the last year is now coming together. But you might have a need where you need to support 10,000 browsers, like in a shop. You don't know how many browsers connecting. You don't know them. They are anonymously users. Okay, maybe have a login, but it's static pages more or less. This is the job of the unlimited web server. Or you might have employees which are working through a browser. You have a business application you're running in a browser. When we have a different kind of licenses, this is where the REST server comes in. You might have noticed when I showed my simple example, I did not use the REST server, I wrote my own REST server. I have just one command, say, give me a number. To write a REST server which is answering simple requests is a job of some minutes. To write a REST server which is having sessions, which is having transactions, which is supporting record logging, is a different story. So we think it makes a difference if you have a server for business application or a server for a website. John is writing that WebSockets was used to be available in Wakanda. Yes, it was available, and it was really missing for me. This was one of the reasons I wanted to have WebSocket server in 4D, because first time I used them was in Wakanda. Yeah. And the second question from him is if we want to run 4D server on Linux. If we want one day to start a new application which is completely incompatible to any existing 4D structure, why not? But many of you are using 4D because we are compatible, because we run code which was written 10 years ago. If you're not using the project mode, you can even run applications written 20 or 30 years ago. The challenging to go to Linux is we would not have printing, we would not have plugins, we would not have so many things we used to have. Or of course we could port everything, but Linux is usually used as a headless server, not as a desktop application. And headless server, there's no printing. So in short, we would lose most of the compatibility, the backward compatibility, which made 4D strong. And I'm not sure there's a big market for a new server, which is the same as 4D, just new. When we could use that opportunity to make it different.
But you did at one time have a 4D server headless project to run on Linux that you're working on, right? You did at one time do some work on that.
1994?
Well, there was a Docker thing that you could get that would install 4D server on Linux, a headless 4D server on Linux.
You can run 4D server on Docker on Windows.
Okay.
A misunderstanding about Docker, which is maybe worth to spend 5 minutes now. Docker is the idea to run code or application without dependencies. So the worst thing if you update a Linux computer is that by updating it, it also updates a lot of other stuff. So I remember when I once updated our internal Ubuntu version and then realized that Isinga is not working anymore because Ubuntu updated Python, but the new Python version was not compatible with Isinga, and I spent half a day just trying to get rid of its dependencies, collisions. And with Docker, you have everything inside this container, so you just know that you drop the Docker engine in and it's working. And that is the cool thing with 4D. The concept is used in 4D now for, I don't know, 40 years. And in the beginning, we even got critics on Windows for that. So 4D means you copy a folder named 4D server on a computer, and everything 4D server needs is inside that folder. All the DLLs are inside. And this allows you to have 2, 3, 4 different versions of 4D in the same computer. You can have version 18, 19, 19R8, and 20 running on the same box. where you would need Docker to run 5 different Microsoft SQL Server or Microsoft or MySQL versions on the same box. This is where you need Docker for that. In 4D, usually you have just a folder finished.
Okay, so just to be clear, as of right now, if people were thinking, boy, I really hope 4D makes a Linux version of 4D server, a headless version of 4D server for Linux, we should stop hoping for that.
Currently, we don't see the value on, honestly. If you talk about hosting, you pay $5 more per month for a Windows box compared to a Linux box. So would you pay us $500 more for a Linux version to pay for the investment? And most people asking for a Linux server expect that the server will be free. I'm sorry, we are a company working for money because we have employees needing salary. And if you look on the latest news from MariaDB, you see that it's dangerous if you don't have a revenue chain. And I think one of the values we provide with 4D is with long-time support. When I visit the summit, and this is for me the main part also for the summit this year, that I can see you guys again in person and not only talk on the phone. When I see you, okay, some of you might have even less hair or more gray hair, but I meet people I'm meeting for 20 or 30 years. So we have provided a platform. Many of you started with to work with it, build a family, build a company, make a career. Some of you became rich. This was, by the way, one of the nicest success story interviews I ever heard, when a customer of a question why he's using 4D answered, because 4D made me rich. Starting with a loan and now have employing 50 employees and making a lot of money with the product. Yeah, this is only possible because we can work for 4D and can provide the service for a long time. And this would not work if you make 4D for free.
Well, and I think that's a good answer to that question. And maybe we can look at just wrapping up. And thanks so much for your great demo and for demonstrating the new WebSocket server. I think it answered a lot of questions that we all have now and it's just great to see it in action. And I'm sure it's going to we'll all be thinking about how it fits into our needs and our clients' needs. So thanks so much, Tomas.
Maybe just to remind again, if you're using web server already, you use the WebSocket on top is free. So you don't need to pay anything for it. You can use it. You can start using it slowly in the application to get something here, something there, and then enhance it. This is nothing where we make money with. But it could be the step to make your website, your web application way more attractive and inspiring for customers.
Absolutely.
Sounds like a good demo for next time.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. If anyone else has any other questions and feedback, we do have a post on the forum on discuss.4d.com where you can post questions for Tomas or in just general questions, obviously. But I just want to say thanks to everyone at 4D for making this this meeting and the meeting content possible, especially you, Tomas. Apologies for the music you had to sit through at the beginning. And thanks everybody for attending and all your great questions. If you'd like to support the user group further, check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/4DMethod to sort of help cover some of the hosting costs and whatnot. But yeah, thank you, all of you, and look forward to seeing you at the summit.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Brent. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you.
All right.